As we get further and further in time, it seems that genetics are slipping away from their original state. And for me, it's had me tracing back and trying to find some of the lineage of some of my favorite genetics to see what the history is and where they came from. And one of my favorite today, of course, is OG Kush and anything of an offshoot. But then I realized OG Kush obviously isn't an heirloom genetic, it obviously isn't a land race, but you know what is? Afghan. So, in this video, I'm taking a deep dive. I want to be able to figure out exactly where this genetic came from. So sit back, grab some water, roll something up or pack it, and get ready for a little history session. Stay tuned.
Like we always do about this time.
So if you're new here, my name is Rob. We talk all things herb. Today in particular is a deep dive episode. But before we get to that, quick shout out to the sponsors who help make episodes like this available for free and also provide some amazing discount codes. Now, the grow room's starting to feel a little bit chilly, but your plants don't have to. Enter VivoSun's AeroFlux Smart Grow Tent Heater. 700 watts of PTC heat delivering 30% more power than the standard heaters, built for tense timing and automation. With built-in sensors, it reads the temperature and humidity in real time, adjusts heat to maintain your target VPD, and stays safe with tip-over and heat protection. Pair that with VivoSun's smart humidifier line, models like the AeroSteam H19 with Wi-Fi and external temp humidity probe, smart constant humidity control, and whisper quiet output. Whether your tent needs more moisture boost or steady baseline, this unit's got you covered. Use code CLtv at vivosun.com or CLtv Watch on Amazon. And if you're looking for some genetics, check out Seedsman. They got your back. Use discount code CLtv to save yourself a little bit and help the channel. Now, long before anybody called it weed or indica, this plant already belonged to the mountains of Central Asia. Well, at least modern science points here. To the land stretching across Mongolia, Kazakhstan, and Afghanistan. Some would call this the birthplace of cannabis itself. Archaeologists have found burned seeds and pollen and burial mounds from the Altai Mountains all the way to the Hindu Kush, dating back nearly 5,000 years. Now, that tells a story that people weren't just growing, they were living the original cannabis lifestyle. In ancient Indo-Iranian worlds, plants were medicine, ritual, and a bridge to the divine. Early texts speak of a sacred drink called hyoma or soma in Sanskrit. Now, this is a plant elixir brought with healing and vision. When Zoroastrianism rose in Persia, their god Hyoma represented that same life-giving spirit. Now later when Islam reached the region, the plant didn't vanish. It evolved with the people. And by the 12th century, Sufi mystics and dervishes across Persia and Afghanistan used hashish and meditation and prayer. Now to them, it wasn't recreation. This was a lifestyle. It was revelation. Now hashish helped silence the ego and open the mind to God. So by the time Western travelers ever saw an Afghan plant, cannabis had already lived that soil for millennia, sacred, medicinal, and essential. It was a part of life, economy, and faith. And in those same mountains, nature itself would refine the plant into something that the modern world would one day call indica. Now, Afghan sits at the crossroads of mountains and empires. A harsh, beautiful terrain shaped by extremes. It's here in Hindu Kush that cannabis became something unique. High altitude, intense sun, cold nights below freezing. The plant didn't have time for endless tropical flowering. It had to finish fast or it was going to die. Generation after generation, the survivors grew shorter, thicker, and coated in resin. Now the resin wasn't about potency at first. It was protection against frost, UV light, and drought. But at the same time, compounds that protected the plant also made it powerful. Down in the valleys, farmers noticed. They weren't just chasing colors or terps, they were harvesting resin. Each fall, families rubbed the flowers by hand until their palms were completely coated and turned black, which then they would press into blocks of hashish, which became their livelihood and their legacy. Now every valley produced its own expression. The bright spice of Mazar-e-Sharif, the earthy skunk of Balkh, and the peppered tones of Kandahar. These weren't just strains, they were land races, plants shaped by environment and isolation. Seeds for one valley rarely mix with another, keeping the genetics pure for centuries, and what those farmers unknowingly built was the foundation of modern indica, fast flowering, resilient, dense, and drenched in trichomes. Every short, heavy plant grown today, every gas-packed nug that drops you into the couch, owes its structure to this original region. It was natural selection, guided by the rhythm of Hindu Kush. And while those mountains shaped the plant, the world outside that had no idea what was waiting there. Honestly, it's just because the world hadn't met it yet, but it was coming. The world met Afghan herb in the 1960s, when a new generation began searching for something totally different and real. They left behind the cities and conformity of the West, following a route from Europe to India that became known as the Hippie Trail. It wound through Turkey and Iran, across deserts and mountains, until it reached Afghanistan. For many, it was the first time they've seen bud out in fields in the wide open. Plants grew freely under the sun, tended by families who've been doing it for generations. The air was thick with a scent that no Westerner had known before. Spice, earth, and resin was everywhere. Now, in various towns, they found hashish pressed into soft, dark bricks, and that burned smooth and strong, something like they never dealt with in the past. Compared to the leafy herb back home that they had, Afghan hash was pure concentration. It was predictable, it was powerful, it was calming, and it was the effect many were looking for. Some travelers didn't just take hash home. They took seeds hidden in clothes, tucked into packs, carried quietly back home. Now, those seeds landed in California, Oregon, and the Netherlands, and they changed the way cannabis was grown forever. Western growers have been working with tall, tropical sativa plants from Mexico, Thailand, and Colombia, and they took usually half a year to flower. Afghan plants, though, they were totally different. They were short, they were fast, they finished in 8 to 9 weeks, and oftentimes they were packed dense and oozing with resin. Now, a lot of breeders recognized this gift immediately. They started crossing Afghan land races with their sativa stock to create stable indoor hybrids. Now, out of those first experiments came legends. Afghani #1, Northern Lights, Skunk 1, Master Kush, Blueberry, all of them carried that Afghan blood. They flowered faster, yielded heavier, and delivered a totally unique, stronger, and more consistent effect. For the first time, growers could depend on a crop, and they could move indoor and control the light, plan the harvest, and really knock things out of the park more than they ever could in the past. Cultivation became predictable, and those hybrids spread across the West super fast. Afghan genetics quietly became the backbone of modern strains. But what breeders were building in the future, the homeland that created those seeds was totally slipping into chaos. Same valley that birthed modern indica were going to become total battlefields. Now, while the rest of the world was falling in love with Afghani herb, the homeland that created it was falling apart completely. In 1979, the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan. The country was thrown into a decade of war. The conflict didn't just destroy cities, it tore through the countryside. Farmers fled, irrigation systems collapsed, entire harvests were lost. Now, for centuries, cannabis and poppy had been a cornerstone of rural life in Afghanistan. They weren't just crops, they were the culture. Plants that fed families and funded communities. But to the invading armies, those fields were seen as enemy resources. Hashish production, once a proud Afghan tradition, was now labeled as illegal and dangerous. Soviet and later Afghan government forced burns of thousands of acres of farmlands, trying to choke off the trade routes that supported local militias. Now, many of those pure land races that had survived untouched for generations disappeared under the smoke. And even when the Soviet war ended, plants didn't get peace. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, international pressure from the United States and United Nations pushed for large-scale eradication campaigns. Herbicides were sprayed from planes, fields were set on fire, local farmers hid their crops deeper and deeper in the mountain valleys, and things just went awry. Each growing season became a gamble. The subtle differences between valleys and provinces, they began to fade. By the time the Taliban rose to power in the late 1990s, much of that genetic heritage was already completely wiped away. Taliban banned hashish production in 2001 completely. But even in the darkest years, the plant didn't vanish. Some farmers refused to give it up. They kept their seeds hidden and they passed them down quietly. And outside Afghanistan, a handful of preservationists realized that it was being lost. Seed collectors from groups like the Real Seed Company, Ace Seeds, and Khalifa Genetics traveled through Afghanistan and neighboring Pakistan. They documented, photographed, and collected what they could before the land races were completely gone forever. Those seeds were stored in private vaults, and later they were distributed to breeders around the world. They became living time capsules, pure Afghan genetics preserved outside of their homeland. And when you hear a grower talk today about running pure Afghan or Hindu Kush, most of those lines trace back to those original preservation missions. They're the descendants of seeds rescued during the war. Without them, there might not be any true Afghan genetics left to breed with at all. It's poetic, really. The same resilience that allowed Afghan cannabis to survive the cold and the droughts and those mountains, they helped it survive wars, bans, and global politics. And while Afghanistan struggled to rebuild, those preserved genetics found a whole new soil to thrive in. They took root in California, in Florida, the Netherlands, and all across the world, and they sparked the next evolution of cannabis. What began as a land race or heirloom genetics in the mountains eventually evolved into genetics that are legendary in the modern world. Out of those ashes came something new, the rise of Kush. Now, by the early 1990s, Afghan genetics had already changed the game, but something new was forming, a branch of the same mountain bloodline that would totally redefine modern cannabis. The word was Kush. Before it became a strain name, before it became a brand, it was just a place. The buds were dense, they were hard, and the resin was thick and super fragrant. The smell was earthy, piney, with that deep mountain spice. And for centuries, local farmers harvested it as hashish. But to Western breeders, these were perfect genetics. Pure, potent, reliable, and when it came to Hindu Kush seeds that reached Europe and Northern America in the late 70s, early 80s, breeders immediately recognized their potential. In Holland, companies like Sensi Seeds stabled pure Hindu Kush lines, and they released them commercially. The same mountain genetics made their way to the West, from the Hindu Kush to the California coast. Sometime in the early 1990s, a Hindu Kush variety crossed with a Chemdog line, possibly with a touch of Thai influence, resulted in what today is called OG Kush, and this is allegedly. No one can agree exactly where it was born, but some say Florida, some say Lake Tahoe, but what definitely is certain is that the backbone came straight from Hindu Kush. OG Kush hit the scene like an earthquake. It was loud, gassy, and it hit harder than anything else before. One of my favorites to this day. It combined Afghan structure with an American edge, really dense buds, complex flavor, and an effect that was both euphoric and really heavy. And for OG Kush, a whole new family tree exploded. There comes Bubba Kush, which is a Florida cut that leaned a little bit more into that earthy, somewhat coffee-like Afghani funk. Then there's Girl Scout Cookies, which is a Durban poison crossed with an OG Kush, adding that sweetness, kind of more of a unique color and a heavy frame. You got Gelato Runs, Gary Payton Jealousy, RS11, Permanent Marker. They all trace back to some of these originals. And of course, there's variations in between. Even things like Skittles, they carry some Afghan heritage in their blood, primarily from Grape Ape's ancestry of Afghani 1 through the Mendocino Purps. Different flavors, different terps, same roots though. And that's the quiet truth about modern cannabis. No matter the name on the bag, somewhere, somehow, that DNA is likely tied back to Afghanistan. Those old mountain genetics, they gave the structure that our plants have these days for heavy resin, the reliability, and the faster flowering time. They made cannabis consistent, they made it industrial, and they made it global. And so when people today say Kush, they're not necessarily talking about a taste or a smell, which, I would be personally. It didn't just lend its name, it lent its soul. So next time you're talking on something more modern, remember that you're holding on a descendant of something that potentially came from the Afghan mountains. So some of the history is a little sketchy, and there's things that I couldn't find exact spot-on data, so I left that out. There may be some that I missed, and if those are things that you're thinking about, drop them below in the comments section. Let's continue this story because for me, I nerd out on this, and it's something that I've been passionate about for years. The history of genetics, where the favorite strains have blossomed from, and kind of where things are going in this world for strains. And if you enjoy videos like this, you're definitely going to like these ones too.